Imagine a world where the most devastating conflict in human history never happened. What if World War II was just a chapter that was never written? Today, we're diving into an alternate timeline where the dominoes of history fell differently. Welcome to a world without the Second World War. But before we explore this fascinating what-if scenario, let's consider how history works. Every major event is like a butterfly flapping its wings, creating ripple effects that shape our entire world. Remove one massive event and everything changes. Our story begins in the 1930s. In our timeline, World War II acted like a massive economic stimulus program. Countries poured money into weapons, factories hummed with production, and unemployment plummeted. But without this war, the Great Depression might have lingered like an unwelcome houseguest who just won't leave. Picture unemployment rates staying at 25% well into the 1940s, soup kitchens becoming permanent fixtures in cities, the Dust Bowl continuing to ravage American farmland with no wartime agricultural boom to revive it. Ironically, humanity's greatest tragedy became its economic salvation. Without it, we might have faced a very different kind of suffering. Let's travel to a map that looks completely different from ours. Without World War II weakening European powers, decolonization might have been delayed by decades. Picture Africa in the 1960s still painted in the colors of European empires. India might still be arguing for independence rather than celebrating it in 1947. The British Empire, never drained by 6 years of total war, could have maintained its grip on a quarter of the world's population. But here's where it gets interesting. Without the urgent need for colonial resources during wartime, would European powers have developed these regions differently? Maybe we'd see a slower, more gradual transition to independence. Or perhaps colonial tensions would have eventually exploded into even bloodier conflicts later in the century. Now, let's imagine opening your smartphone in this alternate 2025. Except, spoiler alert, it probably wouldn't exist. World War II was like humanity's greatest hackathon. We invented radar, jet engines, computers, nuclear power, and countless other technologies under the pressure of survival. Without this pressure cooker of innovation, we might still be flying propeller planes and using vacuum tube computers the size of warehouses. The internet? It grew from military communication networks. GPS? Originally designed to guide missiles. Even duct tape was invented for the war effort. In our peaceful timeline, what your greatest technological marvel might be a really sophisticated radio. Though, to be fair, we might have developed some amazing steam-powered contraptions instead. Victorian inventors would be proud. Picture a world map without the familiar blue flag of the United Nations. The UN was born from the ashes of World War II, created by nations desperate to prevent another global catastrophe. Without that shared trauma, would countries have ever agreed to limit their sovereignty for the greater good? Instead of the United Nations, we might have seen the League of Nations continue its ineffective existence, like a debate club with no real power. International cooperation would look completely different. No World Health Organization coordinating pandemic responses, no UNESCO protecting World Heritage sites, no peacekeeping forces wearing blue helmets. Wars might be smaller but more frequent, with no international body powerful enough to intervene. It's like having a world full of local conflicts instead of one massive, decisive war. Let's visit a hospital in our alternate 2025. You might be surprised to find doctors still struggling with infections that we consider minor inconveniences today. Penicillin was mass-produced to save wounded soldiers. Blood transfusions were perfected in field hospitals. Prosthetics advanced rapidly to help millions of veterans. Even plastic surgery was revolutionized by the need to treat burn victims. Without the urgent medical needs of wartime, these advances might have taken decades longer to develop. Ironically, a war that killed 70 million people also created the medical innovations that have saved hundreds of millions since. Though, on the bright side, we might have made different breakthroughs, perhaps focusing more on preventing diseases rather than treating traumatic injuries. Look up at the moon in our alternate timeline. No human footprints would mar its dusty surface. The space race was essentially a peaceful continuation of World War II, fought between former allies using rocket technology developed by German scientists. Without that war and without the Cold War that followed, humanity might still be earthbound. No satellites means no global communications, no weather prediction, no GPS navigation. But here's a fascinating thought. Maybe we would have focused our exploration inward instead of outward. Perhaps we'd have incredible deep-sea cities, or have mapped every cave system on Earth. Captain Nemo might be more famous than Neil Armstrong in this timeline. Imagine walking into a bookstore in this alternate world. No Diary of Anne Frank, no Catch-22, no Slaughterhouse-Five. Entire genres of literature, film, and art simply wouldn't exist because their inspiration never happened. But what would have replaced them? Perhaps we'd have incredible works about the struggles of the Great Depression, or fantastic adventures about colonial exploration. Maybe jazz would have evolved differently without the cultural upheaval of war. The absence of shared trauma might have created a more optimistic cultural landscape. Or perhaps without that common enemy to unite against, our stories would be darker, exploring the smaller conflicts that divide us. Here's where our alternate timeline gets mathematically mind-bending. World War II killed around 70 million people, but it also prevented the births of millions more through disrupted families and delayed marriages. Paradoxically, it may have also caused a population boom in countries that experienced rapid economic growth afterward. Without the war, we might have had a completely different population curve. Maybe the world's population would be higher, with no massive loss of life. Or maybe it would be lower without the post-war baby boom that created entire generations. Every person alive today exists because of a specific chain of events. Remove World War II, and most of us would never have been born. Different people would be living different lives in different places. It's like the ultimate butterfly effect. Change one massive event, and you change literally everyone. Let's consider our planet in this alternate timeline. Without the industrial boom that followed World War II, environmental destruction might have proceeded more slowly. No rapid suburbanization, no massive increase in car production, no industrial agriculture revolution. The Amazon rainforest might still be largely intact. Climate change could be a problem for the year 2100 instead of 2025. But here's the twist. We also wouldn't have developed the environmental awareness that came from seeing the devastating effects of rapid industrialization. No Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring because she never witnessed the effects of wartime chemical production. No environmental movement because we never saw how quickly humans could change the planet. We might be destroying the environment more slowly but also more blindly. As we reach the end of our journey through this alternate timeline, let's consider the ripple effects we haven't even thought of. Without World War II, would we have developed nuclear weapons at all? Maybe, but much later, and possibly through peaceful research rather than the Manhattan Project. Would the Cold War have happened? Probably not in the same way, since it grew directly from the power vacuum and ideological tensions created by the war. Would we have landed on the moon? Eventually, but perhaps as a scientific endeavor rather than a geopolitical competition. Would we have the internet? Maybe, but it might look completely different without its military origins. Every aspect of our modern world, from the United Nations to your smartphone, has roots that trace back to that terrible conflict from 1939 to 1945. So here's the uncomfortable truth we've discovered on our journey. Humanity's darkest hour may have also been the catalyst for our greatest advances. Without World War II, we might live in a more peaceful world, but also a more stagnant one. A world with less technology, less international cooperation, and possibly less awareness of our shared humanity. It's the ultimate moral paradox. Can something terrible also be necessary for progress? Perhaps the real lesson isn't that we needed World War II, but that we need to find ways to drive innovation, cooperation, and social progress without requiring catastrophic motivation. Maybe the question isn't, what if World War II never happened? But rather, how can we achieve the same positive outcomes without the terrible cost? Because in the end, the greatest tragedy wouldn't be a world without smartphones or space travel. It would be a world that can only progress through suffering. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the roads not taken. Remember, history isn't just about what happened, but about understanding how those events shaped everything we are today.